portrayed how treacherous farming was in those days with the dirt flowing. One year, 1934, we didn't even get enough to have seed for the next year's crops. To add to all of that, in the spring of 1934, my father had built a machine shop, a wooden machine shop that he was so proud of, because for years he had stored his machinery outside in the rain and wind and snow. So this machine shop was a great place to repair as well as to store machinery. On a May day, Albert and I had gone to town to enjoy the tractor show, which was quite an event, and it was very seldom that we both left the farm at the same time, let alone even went to town except for shopping for groceries and farm parts. When we were in town, a man by the name of Gaskell came running up to us and said, "Your shop is on fire." So we rode to the farm as fast as we could. My father was trying to carry a barrel of gasoline on fire out the door when he stumbled, and the gasoline and the flames splashed onto his clothes. We had been rushed into the doctor, and the shop burned along with all the equipment and even some stored grain in the shop. So that was an added burden after my father had been trying to pay off some mortgages on the farm. We really had a debate about whether we would go into bankruptcy or not. I can remember driving to town a few days later with Ronald on my lap, and Albert and my father in the front seat debating about what will we do. And I thought, well, surely we're as eager to do that, and we are as anxious to do it as anybody would be to make it go. Whether that had any influence on their deciding not to go into bankruptcy, I don't know. But I often think how lucky we were that we hung on. It took a few years, but came back.
Did you have an understanding banker at that time?
Understanding banker? Yeah, I think we did. In fact, he had some nice things to say when we got everything paid off. But I'm sure he had some anxious moments in between time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I have heard Albert say that the banker said that he could probably make more money with you farming it than to take it over. Do you remember anything
No,
like that?
they probably didn't tell me that.
That
didn't get told
you
that.
didn't feel like that it would do anything to foreclose on it at that time.
Well, that's the feeling I had inside of me. Who's going to go out there and work it? Who's going to be as eager to work it and keep it going?
Yes, because
we were.
of your reputation
We
as being good stewards of the land and good farmers.
But when some people think of giving up, I think about, oh, wait a minute, think about that a while and kind of hang on if you possibly can. Because there's nothing like the land. My father was very, very appreciative of the land, and that's one thing I learned from him.
Now, with this fire, was he injured critically?
Yes, he was. He had breathed some of the flames, and so kind of burned his lungs a little. That was what we were very eager about for several days. However, he recovered from that pretty good. But his next injury was the more severe. He was coming home he'd gone to Cheyenne, Nebraska to meet some friends, and was driving home late one evening and within a car accident at the corner, the curve southwest of Levant, before we had the interstate in there. And the car overturned, and I was in the hospital with Sharon, new baby, and he was a patient there later in the same hospital.
In 1935?
Would have been 35. He had crushed vertebrae, which handicapped him all through the years. And could do surgery on that sort of thing now, but they couldn't then. But the thing that made him comfortable at times, when he'd get to feeling real bad, and lots of times it'd be in the middle of the night, he'd come over to our house and say to Albert, I have to go to he'd take him to the hospital, Porter Hospital Sanitarium in Denver. This was a Seventh-day Adventist place where they had therapy in those days, which, you know, is quite common around here now, but we realized then what it could do. So he lived until 1951 with us, with that handicap, not being able to walk and being very, I should say, muscle bound, I guess, until he would get the therapy. But finally, when the Kobe Hospital opened in 1941, he was the first patient in the Kobe Hospital. They admitted him as a patient of Dr. Victor Eddy's, old Dr. Eddy, before the hospital was open to the general public. So he got lots of relief there, but a lot of it was drugs. So we finally had to take him to the hospital to a rehabilitation center in Kansas City to take care of him.
What we call today drug rehabilitation.
Yes. So we learned how awful dreadful that could be in those days. I suppose it's bad now, but I'm sure it was really bad back then. They just put them in a cell, in a padded cell. Let them wear themselves out.
Was he in Kansas City long with that type of
Oh, I would say it's probably 2 weeks. I'm guessing that. We went to visit him once there. Something else, I remember seeing my first grapefruit. I don't know whether I'd never paid attention, but they had grapefruit out in the road selling it in Kansas City, and I thought, oh, that looks so interesting. I just maybe never paid attention to it if we had it in the store here before, but reminisced about the first third of my life. I thought before I go into the next section, I would like to stop to give tribute to my parents and my grandparents. I'd like to show a picture of my mother's parents, Mr. and Mrs. August Peters. I have heard quite recently that one of our family thinks that my grandfather also came from northern Germany, which was Schleswig-Holstein, the Low Country, and they spoke, my grandparents, as I lived in their home, spoke in Low German to each other. To us, they would speak in English, but I always understood enough about what they were talking about to really understand, even though they were speaking in German. And their phrases were so expressive. I wish that I could put my tongue around those words. I can hear them in my head, but don't have any luck when I speak them. They don't sound like they should and like they did. But often my sister and I will call each other. We have thought of an expression when a certain event or something happens. It will cause one of those expressions to come back to us. You often, most generally, can't think of the expression right out, but it's when something occurs. There's a German word that will or a German phrase that will express it. And I think I'm handicapped a little bit because I'm not good at saying some of those things concisely in English, like the German phrases and words did express. So I'm sorry that I wish I were able to express, but sometimes when I think I'll express them to my kids, they wouldn't know what I was talking about anyway, so I guess it's just the satisfaction of my thinking about it. Anyway, it is thought that the grandfather came from the northern part of Germany also, and I said I guess that fits because this Husum area was a horse country, and that's what my grandfather was particularly fond of. I can recall my grandfather saying that he first lived in Iowa when he first came to this country. We even have a piece on the farm that supposed to come from that era, from the middle 1800s. Isn't supposed to be a real antique piece. It was some kind of a woodworked piece. My father's mother was very revered by her family. They felt she was a great pioneer lady, having raised 11 children after losing 2 husbands, and she's just barely past 30 years of age when she had to provide for this family. Of course, the older children in the family were good to help her in providing from the farm, which she was fortunate to come to Thomas County, so she's able to do that. One experience that the older girls in the family tell was that the father, Mr. Ulrich, had burned some straw out in his farmyard one day, and about a week later a very high wind came up from the northwest, and the fire was stirred up enough so that it broke out and traveled as a prairie fire for 15 to 20 miles to the south of where they were living at that time. The next day the neighbors came back in great anger because their pastures had been burned. You can see what it meant in those days, with the cattle needing the pasture to live on.
Mm-hmm.
And quite a few of the neighbors came, and the grandmother kind of tried to make peace and invited them to stay for dinner. So she sent the children to the cellar to get some hams and things that they had preserved the year before, and they had a big family dinner in this small side house, and kind of smoothed the way so that later when they moved down that part of the country, the Olsons were one of the families whose area had been ruined by the fire, became some of their very best friends. So that was an example of the girls like to tell of how the grandmother was real.
She was a real mediator, huh?
Yes, real knew how to work out problems with when as a family was growing up. They then pointed out how of all of the 11 children, they became professionals in all kinds of areas. One was a banker, one was a lawyer, 2 were school teachers, one was an extremely fine seamstress. And I'm going to show a picture of the dress that she made, and it's very similar to one that she made for my mother's wedding. This was Aunt Lula.
And she lived in
Holyrood. She
Holyrood.
married and was on the farm in Holyrood, but all of her life she was an extra fine seamstress, did lots of quilts and all kinds of interesting things like that for her.
And her married name was Ela?
Ela, that's right. Mm-hmm. And you see how that fits in with Glenn. I guess her father, her
Glenn's
husband
her
was Glenn's
son.
father.
Mhm.
Right. So that I need to show the picture of the grandparents, Peters. These are the Snellbecker grandparents, Mike and Amalia. Married in the early 1880s. She was 18 when she was married. They just come here a few years ago.